Thank you for coming and joining us. It's great to have you.
It's nice to be sort of almost in your beautiful studio.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You're coming soon in November. Yeah.
Very excited. Very, very, we'll be very desperate by that point, I'm sure, to get out of what will undoubtedly be cold grey London. So
yeah, we were planning to chat recently, and like, okay, you were like, no, I need a few more weeks because I'm finishing a book. I'm working really, really, really hard. I need to concentrate. And now you've just finished, right?
So when I'm working for adults, the process is slightly different than with children, in that I'm write it all in one go and then stop and then draw it all, whereas writing and illustrating for picture books sort of happens more in tandem. Obviously, you have to write it first, but the process is a bit more fluid. But this has been 8 months of solid drawing on this one book, which sometimes is very fun and is a real treat that it's my job, but sometimes it's just very repetitive because obviously it's a graphic novel, so you're drawing the same characters and the same settings over and over again. And yes, by the end of the summer, I think when you were asking about doing this, I was like, I don't think I've got any sentences. I've got no.
It's all visual. There's no words in me.
The only thing I've been thinking about is stuff that I made up that nobody else knows about, so I don't think I could have a coherent conversation
with somebody outside of that. Well, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very odd. It's a kind of a very immersive experience, but one that you're being immersed in on your own. So you're in a very strange space in your brain, but everyone else is more or less fine and normal. So
yes,
you can go a bit weird, and I think I'm now coming back from that weirdness, but maybe I haven't fully returned. We'll find out. We'll find out.
Who does? We're always in that flux. Yes, Marie-Elaine. She was here a few months ago. So when she was here, I showed her Alison. She said she found it really, really inspiring. And she was surprised to find that it was fiction, because she said, I thought Alison and Patrick Kerr were based on real people. I wonder where you got inspiration for this book, and were you inspired by biographies of real artists? Okay. And also, so for picture books, she was saying it's common to make several sketches to work out the composition color for every spread. But how does that work for a graphic novel with so many illustrations? How long did it take?
Specifically about Alison, they're all made up people. And I tried not to read biographies of existing artists. I did some art history at university. I have just generally like the experience of being an artist and experience the work of other artists. So there's like inherent knowledge, stuff I already knew, but I tried not to engage too much with real biographies in case I started stealing things. So it was all fiction, but a lot of, I don't know, a lot of it I was just making up based on feelings that I had or things that I felt like I knew, which I think is certainly the best way to write, for me, to write a first draft, is to not get bogged down in research and to just write what I basically think I know, and then I can add, look up dates or events or whatever information that I specifically need to add to that. But so it was very, very from my own head, that book. What was
just I blocked all those questions onto you.
Doing rough sketches. Sorry, I'm aware that I just said roughs like 3 times, probably like a small dog. Just like rough. I did do rough sketches, but they're very, very rough. So what I do is I print out the script, and then I have a sketchbook, and I cut out bits. I cut out chunks of the script to correspond with how they'll go roughly in the book and where the dialogue will go, and then I sort of draw on top of that the box with the image in, but very loosely, because as you said, as the as they said, like, it takes a while when you're doing picture book roughs, and there's a lot of options. And actually, if you were to rough out the whole graphic novel, if I was to rough out the whole graphic novel, I would then feel, I suppose you feel like you've completed it in some way. Like I've drawn all this stuff, and now I have to go back into it again. And I get that a bit with picture books. I've done 24 drawings, and now I have to do them all again properly. And sort of the excitement is gone because you've had the fun. The fun bit is often having the idea, or the really creative bit, the bit where the kind of excitement happens, like, oh, it could be this, or this could go here, and I don't want to lose that excitement, so I have to keep my roughs quite scrappy often, fear that I'll kind of lose the magic. And then when you're doing hundreds and hundreds of drawings, the magic gets lost quite quickly. So yeah, they're really rough, and maybe only I can understand what's happening in them. And then I'll do some sample images and work out what things will actually look like. And then in combination, I've sort of worked out how the book's going to go. Yeah. I don't recommend it as a process. It's a mad way to spend your time. Yeah, doing hundreds and hundreds of small drawings. It's not sensible.
So for you, figuring out the story comes through words.
Yeah.
Even though because I've read that you say I consider myself an illustrator first and foremost, but still stories are in words for you first when you're trying to figure it out, at least, and part of the process is.
Yeah, they're in notes. There's like character sketches, and there's stuff that I know is visual, and I have to try and hold it in my brain in a way that's very dangerous. I'll have a visual idea and I'll be like, well, if that's good, I'll remember it in 3 months' time when I have to draw it.
No,
I won't remember it. I mean, I don't remember it from like the night before to the next morning. So I don't know why I think I can hold on to this stuff. But yeah, I do write it first. And I think that is because the drawing is fun, and you can get so lost in drawing and illustrating that your story can go quite far in the wrong direction. If you're sort of being 100%, well, if I was being 100% led by my drawings, I think I'd get to quite a weird place quite quickly. And that might not be good for the story. So I do need to write it first, even if it's just writing it out in sentences, very, very plainly, writing out the plot. And then particularly with picture books, the next stage where you're thumbnailing, I think that is writing as well. Even though you're drawing, you're still writing the story when you're drawing out. Your first few batches of thumbnails are really yeah, that's still storytelling. That's still the initial stage of working out a plot, and you learn so much in that bit of, oh wait, this has to happen here, so that means all of this stuff needs to go in a slightly different order, and you can see it so easily in thumbnails. It's sort of the key part of the writing process for a picture book. In a graphic novel, it's a bit different because you can never really look at it as a whole in the same way, which is very annoying. Yeah.
It must be so challenging to get a sense of the whole.
Yeah, I have to scroll really fast through my InDesign document. I'm like, oh yeah, it looks a bit like that.
See the overall design, the overall
I
shape.
can draw, yeah, sometimes I do little diagrams, or like I kind of can plot out, it's this, then this, then this, then this. But it's not the same as looking at a lovely, neat 12 spreads of thumbnails. Yeah. You learn so much in the drawing, and there's so much you realize you can take out of a text often when you're drawing it. Like, I don't need that, I don't need those words. When I'm working with students, I love being able to be like, you don't need that, you don't need that, you don't need that. This can all be your drawings. And isn't that fun? Isn't that like a great relief in many ways, that you can draw so much of your story, and but you only find that out when you're roughing it out. And that is true in a graphic novel as well. I think that once I start drawing it, I realize how much extra information I can put in. Things like changing someone's haircut halfway through a story, or changing the way that they're dressing, or adding things in the background that tell you a certain amount of time has passed, or yeah, that is you maybe wouldn't remark upon in text or in prose because it's not integral to the plot or you don't have time or space, but you can just slip it in a drawing, and as a reader you might not pick it up on the first go through, but on the second go through, oh yeah, they changed their hair, that must, I don't know, maybe I think I attach a lot of symbolism to changing hair, but
but time's passed, or
yeah,
because Alison goes through quite a few years, so time's passed for her, but the fashion changes, and atmosphere in the city changes, and her position in that art world changes.
It's great, it's fun sometimes.
Oh yeah, how long did it take you to make the book?
Really, the really obnoxious answer to that is about 6 months, which is very quick. But it was lockdown, and I'd sort of had the idea in my brain. I'd literally got to the end of a kind of very rough first draft by about March 2020 of writing it. So then I had, to my surprise, suddenly a lot of time with nothing to do, and that really got it done. Whereas this book that I've just done took a chunk of last year to write, and this year I've been constantly working on it, but the writing took ages because I had other work to do and stuff. So yeah, Alison was one of those. I don't think that will happen again for me, of just being able to sit down and do it in one go.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was very quick. But I can see
maybe the story was ready, was mature in you. Like sometimes the story is something you still have to pull out of your subconscious, or you have to piece together. It's an inkling, but it's not quite formed in your brain before you start writing.
Yeah,
and other times it's more ready to go.
Yeah, this one was annoyingly ready to go, and then this second book has been much more of a slow burn, dragging it desperately, just trying to pull it out myself.
Pulling teeth.
Yes, so it was one of those unusual situations where everything kind of coalesced, which I haven't had on any book project before, and I will probably never have again. I hope.
It's just one of those wonderful things.
Yeah, I hope I won't ever be trapped in my house for 6 months again. But yeah, I would like the magic. It just falls out of me experience again. That would be good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's great to know that it doesn't always happen, because when before I started writing, I just would get these ideas. I'd see somebody in the street or something, and I'd be like, oh, I wonder what their story is. And I'd have that urge to write. But then the next second, literally, I'd be like, well, but I don't know how the story ends. So, well, I'm clearly not a writer. I kind of thought that these things were just either there or they weren't. And then sort of over the time, I just realized, no, it's called creativity, because you have to create the bloody thing. It's not it's not like a download from like, oh, click and it's already there. I mean, it happens, it does happen, but generally it's just, that's not the point. And it wouldn't be much fun if it was that easy, because then it would be like, well, the whole point is the discovery and the exploration.
Yes, I completely agree. I definitely get that same thing of being out and about and feeling so inspired and like, oh, the ideas are just coming, but they're all the start of an idea. And then the next bit, where you have to sit down and actually do it, is trickier, and I'm more liable to have a sulk halfway through that and give up and walk away. But then you stick with it, and that's how this stuff happens, I suppose. Just the one thing, the one of those mad little ideas that you've had that you're like, oh, I'm going to stick out this one. Is the special bit. Yeah.
Cool. This is from Susanna. So she's starting a project, and she's saying, how do you keep images spontaneous and also cohesive so that the book successfully hangs together as a finished piece?
That is really tricky, and I know that my drawings migrate. So they'll start in one place. A character will start out looking one way, and time will pass because of how time works. And in 3 weeks I'll be drawing them ever so slightly differently. And whether that's just because I've changed the way I'm sitting in my chair, or the pen that I'm using, I've been using for 3 weeks now, and the nib is worn in a certain way that the line comes out a bit differently. I don't feel in control of it. I definitely, you see, a lot of the time it's cartoonists who can draw their character the same every single time. And you're just like, how? I don't know how your body's muscle memory is that accurate. Mine is sort of a bit wobbly. And it definitely gives me anxiety. In picture books, you've got such a confined area. So if your character changes across those 12 spreads, 14 spreads, whatever it is, you can usually sort of prop them back up into the right shape with a bit of editing or redrawing them. It's unlikely that you're going to have massively altered the way that you draw across that space. But over a graphic novel, I find that really difficult. Just that I started this in February drawing, and now it's September, and my hand wants to do different things. And ultimately, I think I've decided I'm just going to lean into it. And I've seen other artists, though. So Gillian Tamaki is one of my favorite graphic novelists, and I remember reading a book that she'd illustrated, Skim maybe, and noticing the way that her characters kind of move across it, and sometimes their faces are one way, and sort of thinking at first like, oh my god, Gillian Tamaki does what I do. It kind of goes a bit wonky and a bit skewed, and then thinking, oh yeah, that's because that also happens in us. Like some days you look one way and some days you look slightly skew or slightly yeah, you're doing something else, or your mood has changed and your face hangs differently or whatever it is. So there's a bit of like, there is some reality in that I find useful. Making sure you're keeping your materials consistent, you're not changing your paper. Halfway through this book, the pads of paper that I'd been buying to draw on, they'd obviously changed the way they were being pressed. And I put the pen on the paper, it had the same cover and everything. And I was like, oh, it's different, it's different. And I was sort of holding these pieces of paper to my face, trying to spot and they were different. I found if I drew on the back of the paper, it was slightly better. So I had to go to London Graphic Centre and rifle through all of their versions of this pad of paper to find the old one, because I was like, oh god, this is going to ruin my book. And obviously it was only a slight difference, but there is like a speed to paper. Every paper has a slightly different drawing speed, and you're kind of and it changes the outcome of your line. I think probably the only advice is to, if you're keeping everything the same, your materials, maybe the angle of the desk that you're working on, the chair that you're sat in, yeah, not mixing. If you're using paint, not the water that comes from different taps has different qualities, so keep the water from the same tap, because that sometimes changes your watercolor if you're using that. If you keep all of those things the same, then the only variable is you. And then I think if you can be generous to yourself and say, like, there's going to be some variation, and that's coming from me, and that's my mood or my physicality on any given day, then that's kind of a gift to the book, isn't it? That's like a nice human quality, and I like seeing it. But it does, yeah, it's a lot of it is practice as well. Obviously, the more you do, the more you draw these things, the better you get. That's for it. But most of the time, I think that like those faults and errors are a gift, really. Yeah.
As long as you recognize the character, obviously. I mean, sometimes I'm done drawings, it's like, actually, that doesn't look like the same person. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a bit too much.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a big range between there and just having the odd fluctuation.
Totally. So the key is often to give them a very specific haircut or glasses or something that means you can always identify them on a page.
Yes. You know that she's the only one with that.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Let me see what else Susanna wrote. I'm at the nervous beginning of starting to write and draw a book. I have lots of floating notes, ideas, and drawings, and know that there are some illustrations coming at me to do, which will stretch my skills hugely. And in the stretch comes new learnings, evolving style, which I want to allow. But any tips for keeping a leash on things and sticking to a unified style for cohesion's sake would be greatly appreciated.
I've been an illustrator since 2009, and since I graduated to now, and I think the further along the path I get with that, the more I have to accept that there are ways that I do things and ways that I would like to do things. And in the gaps between projects, I can experiment with the ways I would like to do things. And then when I'm working on a book, there is sort of a necessity. It's like, how can I actually physically do these 12 illustrations, these 12 spreads, or these 300 pages, or whatever it is? Like, what can I actually pull off consistently over those? And you can do, I did lots of experiments for this new book, testing out lots of different materials. And then the minute I started drawing a series of panels, it became clear, you have to do it this way because you're not consistent enough yet in these other ways of doing it. So trying stuff out on little spot illustrations is very different than trying out on a full illustration, and then very different again from doing 2 or 3 in the same style. And I think there's a lot to be said for like comfort zones, and it can be a phrase that's used negatively in terms of you've not gone out of your comfort zone, but a kind of reality TV style or whatever. But actually, the place where you're comfortable is probably the place where you're going to produce the most consistent and the most controlled, and produce the work in the easiest manner for you. So I think there's a lot to be said for like not trying to reinvent the wheel, for not grabbing at too much stuff to try out for the first go. And then in the gaps between projects, that's when you really get stuck into, I want to learn how to oil paint, or I want to learn how to do charcoal. No one wants to learn how to do charcoal. It's awful.
I love charcoal.
No, you monster. Gosh, I'm so impressed with people who can use charcoal, but I do think they must have made some kind of Faustian pact somewhere along the line, because I don't know how you
know how to use it. I said I loved
it. Okay. Maybe that's the key. Maybe you just have to love it and accept that she can never be tamed.
Yeah.
Because I just get in such a mess and it stresses me out so much. Yeah.
Do you ever do a project? I mean, I guess now you're at a point where you're getting, you're publishing, it's going really well, maybe even getting proposals and stuff like that. So you know that most probably what you're doing is heading towards publication. But there are times in one's career, maybe earlier on, or when that might not be so obvious, or you might want to take time to just explore your style, or write or create a story because you want to learn, and how you're going to learn if you don't create a picture book. How you're going to learn to make picture books?
It depends what you're working on, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm very rarely now in a situation where I'm just noodling away. for better and worse. Obviously, it's nice to be paid to do my work, but what is sad about particularly British publishing is that there's very little time to experiment. You've sold a book, or you've been commissioned to illustrate someone else's book. Here's the deadline. You better get drawing because we need the roughs here. We need that, and then that experimentation time is gone from the schedule. You don't really have time to do a spread 3 different ways and work out which one you like best. So professionally, I don't have that luxury anymore, which is a really sad reality, I think, of professionalizing the thing that you love. That actually a lot of the bit that you love, which is, what if I did it in ink? What if I covered myself in charcoal and yet got none on the page? Like, all of that stuff is sort of, yeah, like polished out of the process for work, which is why if I'm not working on a book, that's where I'm going to the art shop and buying a load of stuff I haven't used and working out what it does, or what I do when I use it. Within a book, so I probably have very little experience of being really able to play within the stages of making a book. But I have a lot of it outside. So yeah, I do that outside of a book. If you're developing your own idea pre-publication, pre-agent, this is for you, then definitely experimentation should play a massive role. But there is also there is a part of it that you have to think about what will make this book happen. Maybe not in publication terms, but just how will you finish this? And I think a lot of what means that people get to the next stage of a creative career is simply being someone who's able to finish something, and that there's not a magic other secret there's not secret information that other people have. It's literally that they've finished something. And so there is a point where the experimentation has to become more controlled and settle into something that then is a coherent a project that you can place some coherence on, and like, I'm going to do these 10 things, and then I'm going to have a book and it's going to be finished and I can show people.
I love that. I think it's so wise, especially at the beginning. There's so many options, and you're looking at, like a book, your bookshelf with full of your favorite illustrators or authors, and you're like, oh, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that, and you're not able to do it yet. And there's the gap between where you are and where you want to be, which is unfathomable. And
also wonderful.
Also,
that gap is great, and the fact that you know that you're in that gap is exciting and promising, because you can see where you want to go. And obviously a journey is so much easier when you know where you're aiming to end up, and whether or not you get there, it doesn't really matter, but as long as you can see where you're trying to head. Whereas if you feel like uninterested in the work of other artists, or you see you're kind of, you're feeling like, well, I'm already fully formed, I'm not aiming at anything, then it does become that propulsive feeling maybe isn't there, of like, I want to get to that, I want to be like these people, I want to try all of these things. I think it's really good, it's really fun to be in the gap, and we should all stay in the gap for as long as possible, and try not to polish ourselves off too much. But then there is a bit where I think the magpie stuff has to stop. Just within the process of one project, like there's the research bit where you're grabbing, and then you have to allow yourself to be like, okay, I've taken all of these things, now I'm going to close those books, I'm going to stop looking at art on Instagram, and I'm just going to see what I make, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to get to the end.
The feeling of solidity to that, it's almost like you're in this sort of void of beauty and potential and possibility and exploration, but then you get to a point with, as you say, with a specific project, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to create this little plot of land, which is where I can actually stand on and actually make some progress, and I'm just going to allow for this time, and it doesn't have to be that all your books are going to be like this.
You bubble yourself off, and then you can go back and gorge again when you finish, or when you've got to a certain point where you're feeling comfortable with things, and then you go back and you refer to other artists and go, oh yeah, how did they use color there? Because I kind of want a bit of that.
I love that.
Yeah,
it's very wise. This is about your tiger book. So this is Tonka. I would love to know more about the process and also how you developed the setting of Granny's house and the garden. Was it based on observation and real life inspiration?
The grandma in the book is my grandma.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And the garden is, in inverted commas, her garden, but it is obviously, it becomes fantastical quite quickly. And I wasn't really referring, quite obviously, when you look at the plants in the book, to anything real. It's all more meant to be what a child feels like a garden is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a very clear location in my head, but I didn't look at photos. I didn't, yeah, it was sort of more what it felt like when I was 5 in that garden. And I think I do that a lot, of setting stories in places that I know, but without being too rigid about it. So mostly because I'm very bad at spatial thinking. Good at flat. Can make a nice flat painting, but my partner was an architect, and when he draws, he's also an illustrator. His sort of the location comes first, and he'll think of a place, imagine a place, invent a building, and then think what happened there. Whereas I definitely am someone, I really start with people or a feeling, and like, what can I make that into? But he can draw a simple building, and he knows what the shape of every room in that building, just based on the shape of this of the exterior. He knows that straight away inherently, whereas I don't have that ability at all. Very, very 2D brain. So I use a lot of places that exist, places that I've been, places that I vaguely remember as the base to put fun stuff on. I think that's quite useful, because then, however fantastical you go, you're rooting it in something that seems vaguely solid in your head, and it just means the work is done for you. Sorry.
And also, but you're not bogging yourself down.
Yeah.
With, it has to be exactly the way it is in real life, and taking photos. And then if you don't have the right photo, you can't do the picture because you're relying on those too much. So it seems like a really great middle ground there.
Yeah, so it is really useful. Just set it somewhere you sort of remember, but you
feel free.
Yeah, you feel free with. Particularly if you've got like an emotional connection to it, you can really explore how that place feels to you, which is obviously what a children's book is about, really. It's like, what does the world feel like?
I love that.
To me, it feels like this. And you're asking your reader, the child, what does it feel like for you? With a book, I guess. So yeah, I think being able to, I think what I've generally found is children's illustrators remember a lot about being children, for better and worse. Yeah, and a lot of their emotional memory and a lot of their visual memory is very intact. And I think that's like a superpower when it comes to making children's books, is to be able to recall the specificity of your like childhood memory with some ease. It's very useful. And if you can do that, like, please put it in your books.
Amazing.
Because it's great when when you're seeing it, when you're looking at someone else's picture book, and you're like, I haven't experienced this, but I think this illustrator has. I think this is a place they know, or I think those are clothes that they've worn, or that person in the background, that person is too specific to be made. Like, that must come from somewhere, and it's so wonderful when you see it. Yeah,
do you think that process is rational, sort of like, okay, I want this to feel like that, so I'll use warm colors because I want it to feel warm, or is it just something that emerges in a feeling, instinctive sort of way?
I suppose everyone does it differently. For me, it's probably quite instinctive, and some of that again is to do with time constraints of working on picture books for money. That often the deadline is much tighter than you would expect. So being able to trust your gut is quite important. Just be like, oh, it's blue. It's got to be blue.
And so, should we just tell people a little bit about what we have in mind for the retreat?
Yeah. So I suppose it sort of depends what you're coming with. So what you want to work on, and I'm up for working on anything. And I love working with other people's picture books. I find it so fun and so exciting. But also, if you want to come with a sort of the comic graphic novel end of a picture book or something related to a picture book, then I'm up for that too, and we can explore both of those things. I'm very keen on kind of some ideas generation, some playing around with how we come up with ideas, how you can trick yourself into coming up with ideas, whether that is related to something you're already working on. So if there's a point in your story that you're kind of stuck at where something isn't working, how can we kind of trick ourselves into working our way out of it, but also how can we fast track that story generation process, that image generating process. So a bit of that. I like looking at composition. We'll do a bit of that, at playing with composition, breaking it, rebuilding it, refreshing it, trying to get outside of like our own habits. So like, how can we surprise ourselves with our own drawing and our own illustrating. But I think my main focus, certainly as a writer and illustrator, is on storytelling and the relationship between the words and the pictures, and that balance, and how we can make that as kind of rich and delicious as possible. So a bit of that, and then hopefully some sketching and wandering and poking around in some beautiful bits of Rome.
Absolutely. And we always just so people know, we always sort of tailor the retreat to the tutor. Like, well, obviously you'll be bringing all your very unique expertise and approach and personality, and also to the people who are coming. So we always sort of tailor make it to who comes. So that's part of the fun.
Yes, that does sound that sounds great. And if you have nothing, if you're like, I've never done this before and I want to try, we can definitely pull a picture book out of, what is it, 5-6 days. We can make that happen. So if you've got nothing at all, don't let that put you off. We can absolutely get you a draft by the end of the retreat. So
brilliant. I think that's definitely a concern that people have voiced to me. It's like, I don't have a specific story to work on. What can I maybe I'll come another time. It's like, no, this is a great opportunity to actually
come this
make
time.
It happen.
We can definitely and it might, I think what's really important, like what I talk about a lot with my students, so I teach picture books at Goldsmiths here in London, and what we talk about a lot is that the book you make on the course, that maybe the thing that you're working on in the retreat might not be the one that gets published, but it might be the thing that gets you the meeting. It might be the thing that gets you an agent. It's the thing that shows the way that your brain works, the images that you create. So yeah, it might not be the most perfect, flawless piece of work, but hopefully it could be the thing that gets you that bit closer. So it's worth having a bash and not waiting for the perfect idea. I think that's that can be the thing that holds us back. So much better to muddle through, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Lizzy. It's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you and hearing all your thoughts and ideas.
Thanks, so nice to talk to you. I'm so excited. Can't wait to be in Rome.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting. I can't wait for it to actually happen. Just be here, having had breakfast together, chatting, looking at books, drawing, sketching, running around.
I've been like, my eye keeps getting caught by your bookcase behind. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's in there. Trying to identify spines. Like, do I know what that is?
1st to the 6th of November in Rome, Inky Larks, Lizzy Stewart. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much.
See you there.